Hello everyone, Arden here, bringing you a long-running theory that we've discussed among the crew members for around a year now. We decided that this would be the time to throw the theory on the table and see what sticks. Please be aware that there will be spoilers for 1.0 through patch 5.55, as well as some references to the CGI and launch trailers for Endwalker. If you would like more lore, theory crafting, and story discussion content, take a moment to subscribe to our channel and click the notification bell. Our weekly podcast will be resuming on January 2nd, 2022, and we have a special episode planned for December 19th, 2021. We hope to see you there! If you do not already have a tinfoil hat, please pick one up at the door. While these theories are based on in-game lore, the craft of storytelling, and trope analysis, this is still speculation. Furthermore, there is always the question of how far will Square Enix actually allow the team to go? This is, at its core, a theory that we, the Warrior of Light / Darkness / Variable Lighting, is due for a staggering defeat in some fashion by now. We keep winning and winning and winning. Even when we have a brush with death, something happens to prevent our demise. Yet, something eventually must give. The struggles of a hero. Warrior of Twilight. Struggle is part of the recipe for a compelling narrative. Certainly, we see many overpowered protagonists come out of Japan, especially in JRPGs and anime. However, even they often have some manner of struggle within their various arcs. Your mileage will vary, of course, with how meaningful any of these struggles are, but they're still there, be it moral, emotional, physical, or something else. Morals are obvious given the 5.x storyline and the player base's reaction to it. We are faced with the knowledge of the Ascian motive, something we didn't have a clear grasp on in prior expansions. Between the knowledge of the world's current state is unnatural, the rising questions regarding Hydaelyn and Vana's motives, and the nature of the Blessing of Light, we're struck with somewhat of a moral dilemma here. While it isn't seen as right for sundered beings to give up their lives so that the ancients may live and thrive, the opposite isn't morally right either. I'd imagine this is why there's so many hints of us forging a third path. Several moments in the Shadowbringers questlines gave the player character pause. Before engaging first Hades and then Elidibus, they seem to pause and consider, and in both cases consult in one way or another with Ardbert before proceeding. Emotional may be less obvious to those who haven't played Dark Knight. Without spoiling anything, I will simply say the Dark Knight questline is where the player character has been getting all their therapy over the years. I highly recommend playing through it and keeping an eye on your journal while you do so. It's really something quite special. Now that we no longer have job quests, the player character has no outlet. With that out of the way, on to the meat, physical and combat struggles. The last time we, the Warrior of Light and Darkness, has had a close brush with death via defeat was when we faced off against Elidibus and Zenos' body at Gimlet Dark in 4.56 A Requiem for Heroes. We could have met our end there, but Estinian arrived in time to save us. Prior to Elida Zenos, the real Zenos was our biggest threat. He only spared us because he saw potential. Before that, in Heavensward, Oshafont saved us from meeting a spear of ether to the gut, in a fashion that's eerily reminiscent of how Hades dies at the end of 5.0. I suppose we had some close calls in ARR too, though those perhaps make more sense for the budding adventurer that we were. Then there's Shadowbringers. There was never fear of defeat with Ranjit. The Light Wardens were as leaves in the wind before us. It was the light ether itself that we struggled so greatly to contain, and it is that which nearly overtook us. Yet, we had enough threads woven throughout the narrative to have an idea of how that would end. Ardbert. Despite Hades' strength, he didn't bring his full might to bear against us, and thus did we defeat him. Throughout the patch cycle and through 5.3, again there was no massive threat to us, no close calls that made you think, oh no, and brace for our character to receive an extreme injury or defeat. We are long overdue for a meaningful struggle, and with the way the stakes are increasing, the new threats before us, and the combination of villains we're looking at, I find it quite likely that we may be coming up on a true defeat. In defeating Elidibus, we have cut the ties keeping the Sundered Ascians in check. We have erred, and for this error, we may pay an ultimate price. At least for a quest or two. Maybe half an expansion, if lucky, though doubtful now that we've seen the trailers for Endwalker, though I do have some hope still. The demise of twin heroes, Ozem and Emet-Selch. I'll deep dive into the possibilities of how we might die later, but for the interim, here's the short list. We are meant to die, and time will not accept the diversion of the 8th Umbral Calamity. Zenos kills us sometime during 6.0. Fandaniel oversteps and kills us himself sometime during 6.0. Hydaelyn decides we're a threat and turns others with her blessing against us. Hydaelyn uses #primal powers to over-aspect us and turn us into a Light Warden. We go to confront Hydaelyn about the one true world, and she tries to erase our memories. Why do I want the Warrior of Light to die? Honestly, there's quite a few reasons. I'll break it down, including my reasoning, to the best of my ability. We will need to begin with the Ozem Crystal and Hades, as pondering the usage possibilities of the Ozem Crystal is part of what led to this set of theories. The other part stems largely from musing as to how Hades might return to the story, alive or otherwise. We currently have an item upon us that allows us to summon the stars to our side, the Ozem Crystal. It is important to remember who made the crystal for us, and that is Hades, Emet-Selch. We learned from the short stories that Hades has a deep connection to the underworld, also known as the Lifestream or Ethereal Sea, and in the White Day 2020 short story, Hydaelyn refers to Hades as Lord of the Underworld. Between all the short stories and what we see of him in-game, we can safely assume that he has some degree of command over the Lifestream itself. At the time of writing this, it is unclear if Hades has actually given himself over to the Lifestream's currents, though it's probably safe to say that he hasn't yet. It is strongly implied that, rather than dissipate and reincarnate, Hades was simply resting and recovering within the Lifestream. When we summon him in Seat of Sacrifice to save us in our battle with Elidibus, that is essentially us waking him up, and him appearing to give us our aid. But how? We can assume that the Ozem Crystal, created with his ether as it is, can serve as an anchor for Hades. Now that Hades is untempered, appears to have stepped down from his seat in the Convocation, because he appears with a white mask in the Seat of Sacrifice, and knows his dearest friend / beloved exists in some capacity, he has some reason to linger. Plus, boring him is a cardinal sin, is it not? And how do you think he would feel about Fandaniel wishing to recreate the final days? In some ways, Hades lingering in the Lifestream to spectate us and possibly even mentor us through the Ozem Crystal may be one of the only ways forward without something awful happening. Here are some relevant points going forward. The final days were caused by a cacophonous keening from beneath the earth, which wrested control of the ancients' creation magics from them. Henceforth, I will refer to this thing as the sound. We seem to have technically been risen to the seat of Ozem during the scene leading into the Seat of Sacrifice. However, we don't appear to have regained any memory. Something may have gone wrong or otherwise blocked the crystal's function, if it was meant to restore memory in the first place. As it is, it's unclear. One of the reasons I would like for the Warrior of Light to die, honestly, is a practical one. The time bubble in Final Fantasy XIV has become a problem over the years in my opinion, and I would really like to see a time skip of 5+ years on the source. An excellent way to do this would be by having some aspect of Fandaniel's apocalypse actually succeed. We could die to the apocalypse, or to any of the other numerous things that I'm going to talk about in this video. After all, we're at a unique juncture. This apocalypse could kill us, or it could succeed because we die before we get a chance to stop it. However, it's established early on in the game, and reinforced again in 4.x and 5.x, that those with the Echo or the Resonant are capable of becoming immortal. Most recently, we see this with Zenos as he body hops like an Ascian until he is able to reclaim his flesh as his own. There's absolutely nothing in the game to suggest that we can't also do this. In fact, we have much more evidence to support that we can. We could, in theory, die and return to our body at some later juncture and reawaken in the world of ruin, so to speak. This would allow some addressing of the time bubble, modification to zones based on user MSQ progression, which we've seen the team experiment with increasingly over the past few years, and it would allow for the Scions to age more. Alphino and Alisaie, particularly, drive me crazy because they've been physically 16 for so long. At some point, I'd imagine they would want to do their Archon thesis, and it would be weird to see them remain teenagers indefinitely throughout all their growth. Well, assuming they don't die. Part of this is due to us learning that the Echo and the Blessing of Light are in fact two different things. The former is a power that can be awakened in ancient souls with a strong enough vision that shares similarities with the final days, such as a comet streaking across the sky. The Blessing of Light is whatever Hydaelyn does to those who awaken to the Echo. Hear, feel, think is quite likely her call that tempers those who awaken. It's interesting because we currently have no idea how tempering from Hydaelyn and Zodiark functions in the metaphysics of 14.
But Arden, can't the Scions see who is tempered by looking at people with their Sharlayan etherometer goggles?
Yes, they can. However, Sharlayans believe that Hydaelyn is a good thing, essentially, and they've done some study on her via the Anti-Tower in the Dravanian hinterlands. While this could mean they know what Hydaelyn's tempering is supposed to look like, as far as we know, the Sharlayans don't even know Hydaelyn is a primal. They probably know what the Blessing of Light looks like, but they think it's just that, a blessing. In fact, there's been a hint of our tempering staring us in the face for a while now, thanks to the Dark Knight render that's used for the Shadowbringers launcher. Call me tempered, maybe? We, the Warrior of Light in that Dark Knight render, have glowing blue eyes. This is, if you were unaware, historically a sign of tempering. Much like the Glory be to Garlemald man at the end of 5.4, we've been seeing this glowing blue eye phenomenon with other tempered characters in the game, such as Midas Nangarlond in the Bosnia quests, and with more NPCs in the Bosnia quests later on. It's also seen in the 4.x patch cycle with one of Lakshmi's tempered. So assuming that we are tempered by Hydaelyn, there are only so many ways we can be Asunat of that. We've known for a long while now that in someone's final moments, their tempering appears to lift and the person they once were returns. Of course, we now have a cure for tempering as well, but with a catch. It takes vast amounts of ether to cure someone who has been tempered, even if they have been exposed to their primal only once, such as Gabu. We have been exposed to Hydaelyn numerous times at this point. There is, of course, still the idea that Hades cleansed us in the Dying Gasp, when he unleashed so much darkness against us. I personally don't subscribe to this theory, but I do believe it's a high possibility. More likely, I think we are still tempered and that will potentially become a point of contention going forward in 6.0. With the end of the Hydaelyn Zodiark arc coming to a close, if we are tempered, that will need to be addressed. I think it's extremely unlikely we're going to get Porkseed better, though I also just don't want it to happen in such a way because it's pretty ridiculous for multiple reasons. Ridiculousness aside, however, it would most likely take too much power to undo an Elder Primal's tempering in such a way. As such, I truly think death is one of, if not the only, option for removing our tempering. Now, am I forgetting anything?
Well, Arden, this is consistent with how the narrative treats the Ascians as well. After all, I think if it was reasonable and practical to untemper the Unsundered, we would have done so at least with Emet-Selch. The narrative could have been constructed so death wasn't necessary. But the player character stood toe-to-toe with him, more or less, and with Elidibus, and narratively they both had to die to be cleansed of tempering. Of sin? If the player character is in that same boat, they could well be impractical or functionally impossible to untemper by that same token. Too much to counteract, or the soul too vast, or something along those lines. We should also consider the theming applied both to the player character and to the Ascians. The lyrics of To the Edge style the Ascians as broken angels cast from heaven's gates. in essence calling them fallen angels. This is consistent as well with the Shadowbringers lyrics, which style them as the hindmost devils. In Christian belief, the devils are the fallen angels who rebelled against God, meaning the terms are synonymous. In a similar, and I think fitting vein, the player character is a savior figure, a stand-in for Jesus. They break the chains of bondage, they bring salvation and succor, and they hold a position of moral uprightness, being the shining example to others around them. They've performed what seemed to others to be miracles on more than one occasion, consistently transcending mortal limits in moments of direst necessity. Of course, according to Christian beliefs, Jesus died to cleanse the sins of the world and save everyone. Assuming the parallels continue to hold true, we might expect the player character to die, at least for a time, before a triumphant return from the grave. This is consistent as well with the other hints we've been given.
Thanks, Neela. I knew I was forgetting something. Now comes the tricky part. How do we die? What causes it? How do we come back? Well, that last one is fairly easy. The short version is, the Lord of the Underworld likely has the ability to help our soul hold on and guide us back to our vessel. For the rest, let's begin with the 8th Umbral Calamity, shall we? The 8th Umbral Calamity, Light and Black Rose. In the simplest of terms, it's entirely possible that we are scheduled to die. The fates have been brought up multiple times in Shadowbringers, and Timelun, the Han of the Mole tribe from the Azim Steppe, has dialogue that changes in Shadowbringers. If you need a refresher, I strongly recommend rewatching the Stormblood cutscene where you first meet the Mole tribe. It's level 65 and is called Stars in the Dark. Ring a bell? It's absolutely insane in hindsight, due to how it ties in with 5.0 through 5.3. Regarding our time to die, it's quite common in storytelling that time does not like to be messed with, and that some events are unavoidable. An averted accident, for example, may simply be replaced by another, and then another, until the desired result is achieved. These repeated accidents often scale in intensity and severity. In this case, I'll be breaking down the 8th Umbral Calamity and the red flags I've picked up over the course of the MSQ, as well as in hindsight ponderings. The people from the Crystal Exarch's future believe they found the cause of the 8th Umbral Calamity, Black Rose, empowered by all the light aspected ether brought to the source by the First's rejoining. However, this is posed as a suspected cause. While it is true that the First was on the brink, there is no concrete evidence to suggest that is truly what caused the 8th Umbral Calamity. One of the things that sticks out to me most is the Exarch mentions the world burning or continuing to burn. This is odd given what we know about the Umbral light polarity. It is a pole of stasis, and we see in the Eden raids that fire can't burn in our camp because the area of the empty is so starved of ether. An overabundance of light, or at least Umbral light, would not make the world burn. Another oddity of the 8th Umbral Calamity tidbits we get is when we're shown Rhalgr's Reach fall into Black Rose. There's a lingering red in the air, which is very much the wrong color to be fire. It is, in fact, more consistent with the hue we see in the final stretch of the Amarot dungeon, and from the towers that appeared in patch 5.4. We also have the issue that we simply don't know how time is going to function after the events of the First. It is brought up several times by the Scions and the Exarch, yet we have no definite answer as of yet. The short stories posted on the lodestone suggest that time moves forward normally in the other branch of that timeline, and that branch is set adrift on its own. However, considering how much importance was placed on do not create paradoxes in the Alexander questline, I have to assume that these events are going to come back to bite us. Either that, or we are heading towards a storyline that focuses on us being unable to truly change the future. There is absolutely a possibility that the 8th Umbral Calamity will still come to pass, and the question becomes, will we die to it? Or will we be saved by someone sacrificing themselves for us as Haurchefant did? Or will Estinians swoop in and save us yet again? With that aside, let us turn our attention to the elephant in the room, Hydaelyn. Hydaelyn, Venat's legacy.
Remember, kids, don't believe Hydaelyn's lies.
With that out of the way, I will attempt to cover some of the issues with Mummy Dearest, of which there are many. The simplest option with Hydaelyn that I've posed is that death is the only way to Asuna her tempering. Yes, I made that joke again. People need to be reminded that spell exists. Yes, I am a salty tank. Delubrum Reginae has traumatized me, okay? Now, let's get on to the juicier possibilities. Integral to most of this, we have the issue that, if Elidibus's 5.0 musings are correct, Hydaelyn and her summoners wish to keep the world ignorant of the past, and of the one true world. We, and the Scions, are now a threat to that agenda. After all, we've started telling others about these events, Lise being a primary one. Cid and Nero may also know of this, considering at minimum they have been told about their alternate timeline selves having helped find a way to travel through time and space. As such, we may well be looking at a situation where Hydaelyn manipulates others with the blessing of light, styling us as a warrior of darkness on the source to eliminate us. In theory, Hydaelyn can expose us to her ether as any other primal can. This would likely turn us into a Light Warden or something akin to it. With the source being closer to whole and her being within it, she may have full control over us were we to turn into a Light Warden. Were something like that to happen, wiping out anyone else who knows the truth would be as simple as pointing us at them and commanding us to eat. The last Hydaelyn related point I'll touch on in greater detail towards the end of this video as it's a tad hefty. Zenos. Our enemy, our friend. This is probably the simplest method aside from just yeeting ourselves into the livestream, honestly. He may be everyone's favorite character to hate, but he's a very real threat, and now he's essentially immortal. We may not even be able to kill him without White Oresight, given the developments from Stormblood until now. How aware of this the Scions are, it's hard to say. Krile and Estinian remark about how he's an Ascian in all but name, but we aren't yet certain how serious they're actually taking this. After all, there hasn't been a single mention of making an Oresight to deal with him yet. To me, that's kind of a huge red flag. Now, as of the Endwalker trailer, we see hints that he may have become an even greater threat than he was before. And given that Zenos has taken up a scythe as his new weapon, there are certainly some concerns there for what scythes often relate to in both visual and written storytelling. This concern is compounded by the fact that, at the end of patch 5.55, Zenos appears to be drawing the ether out of the Garleans he slew. Add that to the scene from the launch trailer, and I've got a hefty amount of both concern and hype. Fandaniel. The Protector? Really, why did he have to choose Asahi's body? I might have liked him were he anyone else. Granted, he does have some fantastic lines.
Ladies and gentlemen, keep your eyes peeled, for the curtains have risen on the spectacle to end all spectacles.
At the Final Fantasy XIV announcement showcase in February 2021, Yoshi P reassured us that Fandaniel isn't the last boss for Endwalker. Additionally, he mentioned that Fandaniel is hiding a deep, dark, complex secret. This revelation is at odds with how the community currently perceives Fandaniel. At the moment, he's seen as a shallow recreation of Kefka or Kuja from earlier Final Fantasy entries. Some will go as far as to say that Fandaniel is less interesting than Zenos, and that he's a poor excuse for a nihilistic villain. I personally disagree with this take, especially after patch 5.55 and the various snippets of information we've been drip-fed over the course of the year. We're looking at a deadly combo with Zenos and Fandaniel teaming up. I think we've seen plenty of indications that Fandaniel isn't all talk, or depose, if you prefer. In the course of a few patches, he's done a lot more legwork than we've seen from most Ascians in 14's history. The twink is getting things done and at a rapid pace. It wouldn't surprise me in the least bit if next time we see him, he does more than singe us a little. Erasure. Promises to keep. How to piss off Hades 101. Try to erase the Warrior of Light's memory. Hydaelyn has manipulated us into trying to kill off the remainder of our people, our compeers, our dear friend. We may go to her and demand answers. Get it? We have indications that Hydaelyn can tamper with memory, but I may need to go into that a wee bit. In the transitionary period between 1.0 and 2.0, the world lost its memory of the Warrior of Light who was at the Battle of Cartano. If you're a Legacy player, upon finishing Praetorium in 2.0, you have a cutscene where Minfilia prays to Hydaelyn, and then there's a flash of inversion over each of the NPCs present, and they remember who you are. If you'd like to know more about inversion, where it appears, and the way it is used in storytelling, I suggest checking out Neela's video on the subject. You can click the card in the top right corner to find it. If Hydaelyn is capable of tinkering with the memories of people she hasn't tempered, then we must assume that she could alter ours easily if she had reason to. Do note, I mean, any reason at all, not just a good reason. Hydaelyn and Zodiark are tools at the end of the day. Etheric AI, for lack of a better comparison, who follow their given directives. Back to Hades. Were Hydaelyn to try and directly interfere with our memory, which would essentially be her making us break our promise to Hades, then I could see Hades using his gift to soul yank us out of our body and into the livestream. Alternatively, this could happen in the scene we saw from the launch trailer, where the Warrior of Light is sitting on Zenos' throne in a daze. How we would get back to our body on the source is another question. Would Hydaelyn just let us go, thinking we were gone for good? Would we remain trapped in the ethereal sea? Would Hades be able to teleport our body elsewhere in an event such as this? There's a lot of theoretical possibilities that I find quite compelling, but without more confirmed metaphysical knowledge about Final Fantasy XIV, it's hard to pin down anything for certain. We simply have a trail of breadcrumbs, which could lead us to a dead end, or to infinitely fascinating places. And really, that's part of the beauty of Final Fantasy XIV, is it not? If you take the time to admire and absorb the game's story, the little puzzle pieces of information sprinkled over the years of MSQs, side quests, encyclopedias, short stories, and more, we have so many possibilities for where Endwalker and beyond can go. If you enjoyed our ramblings, I made your brain itch, or I've inspired you to debate any of the points above, feel free to join us on the LoreLines Discord. We welcome healthy debate and communal debunking so long as everyone remains respectful. Think of it as Amarot's Hall of Rhetoric, but in a digital format. You can find us at LoreLinesXIV on Twitch, Twitter, and Discord, or check the description below. If you stuck through this long, thank you. We would greatly appreciate it if you would like and subscribe, click the notification bell if you'd like to be notified of our lore and theory crafting releases, as well as streams. As I mentioned at the start of this video, we have a special podcast episode scheduled for December 19th, 2021, and our weekly podcast will be resuming on January 2nd, 2022, with a spoiler cast for Endwalker.